In the heart of Southern Africa, a nation stands at the crossroads of economic uncertainty and resilience. Zimbabwe, a country that has weathered severe economic crises, grappled with a turbulent financial landscape plagued by hyperinflation, unemployment, and scarcity of basic necessities. As the Zimbabwean dollar lost its value and the economy spiraled into chaos, the government sought a lifeline to stabilize the nation. Enter dollarization back in the early 2000s, the adoption of a foreign currency as a means of exchange. It introduced the United States dollar as a powerful currency, offering respite from the rampant inflation that had eroded people's savings and shattered their confidence in the local currency. But since 2019, the Emmerson Mnangagwa-led government has sought ways to de-dollarize the country and strengthen the local Zimdollar, but that has not come without its challenges. Now, some Zimbabweans are asking for the US dollar to be considered once again as legal tender. On the Square today, we'll discuss how Zimbabwe got to this point, why measures to de-dollarize seem to be failing the people, and how to salvage the situation. I am Kemini Amano. Thanks for sitting at the Square today. Joining our gathering are Emmerson Mnangagwa. He is political and social commentator. He's joining us from Harare, Zimbabwe. And we also have Prosper Chitambara, who is a development economist, also in Harare, Zimbabwe. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time here on the Square. But I'm just told that we also have a third panelist, Kudakwashi Munemo, who is a political, well, when we do have a third guest, we would introduce them. But in the meantime, we do have Ernest and Prosper. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the Square. And perhaps we should talk a bit more about the current situation. In 2019, the government has decided that it was time to de-dollarize and give some back into the local currency. Why does it seem that people want to go back to the use of dollar? Why haven't those measures worked? Prosper.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It's largely on account of the massive loss of value, the depreciation of the Zimbabwe dollar, of the local currency. So we are currently in a dual currency regime where we have the Zimdollar obviously being used alongside the United States dollar. But what has happened is that owing to too much liquidity, Zimbabwe dollar liquidity, too much money in the economy, there's been a massive loss of value of the local currency of the Zimbabwe dollar. And because of that massive local loss of value, there's also been a loss of confidence by economic agents, the consumers, the private sector, the businesses, with economic agents obviously preferring to use the US dollar for both transactionary purposes and also as a store of value. So because of the chronic high inflation in Zimbabwe dollar, there's been a loss of value, there's been a loss of confidence, and the demand, obviously, for the US dollar is increased quite significantly. So I think that explains why we are where we are. It's because of the loss of value. Why has there been a loss of value? There's been a loss of value because there's too much money, too much Zimbabwe dollar. The government has increased liquidity.
I see. I think Prosper froze there for a bit, but I want to move on to Ernest now. Ernest, again, I'll let you take the same question. Why do you think there seem to be complaints about de-dollarization and the need to go back to the use of the US dollar? Ernest.
Okay, thank you. I think Prosper has put it well in economic terms, and I will speak as a socio-economic analyst. I think the issue is that the local currency has no value. And to that extent, people are clamoring for the use of the United States dollar. Because when you look at it, business people, service providers, and the others would rather have the US dollar as compared to the local currency, which, as Prosper has already stated, has lost value. You go into the shops, you are better off holding the US dollar than the local currency, which is losing value by the hour. I was moving around in the shops a few minutes ago, and shopkeepers are busy changing prices instead of assisting people who are coming in to buy. The shop assistants are actually busy sticking new prices. You ask for a price for a commodity, they tell you that they don't know yet. The new prices are being fixed. So this is on a consistent basis. So what we are having is a situation where the local currency has not been able to pick up value, and the monetary authorities have been trying one measure after the other, but we seem not to be heading towards progress.
I see. And, you know, joining us now also is Tawanda Mutungama, who is a finance and business expert. Tawanda, thank you so much for your time here on The Square. And for you, I want us to go back into time a little and try and figure out how Zimbabwe got to this point to start with. Give us a brief overview of the economic challenges of Zimbabwe over time and now.
Okay, thank you so much. So to give a perspective of how the economy has changed, there is need for a time scale. So if I'm to go 40 years back, it can be a long narration. But however, I'll try to go at least 23 years back. So, or rather, let's go 30 years back. Let's go to 1990, and when there was ASAP. So there was a recommendation to the government to do structural adjustment, and this meant privatize a lot of things. And when things were privatized, it also meant the government becoming more lean, having less employees, and a lot of people were laid off. And from this led to pressure from those who had fought for the liberation of the country. When the pressure mounted, they wanted something. They had fought for land, and eventually they managed to convince the government for a forced resettlement or a forced land redistribution rather than willing buyer, willing seller. And from there, also there was a compensation for the war veterans. So this was number one, which made inflation, because how were the war veterans compensated? Money had to be printed from thin air. And this is something which all governments have. It's called signorage, when you create money out of thin air. And the war veterans were given 50,000 per person. And once they were given this money, this creates extra supply. In other words, we'll be living beyond our means. And what does that do? This causes prices to increase. And I am sure this is a similar scenario we are seeing today, that the government is using its right, its power to create money, which is signorage. But if it overdoes it, it causes inflation. So what am I saying? From 30 years back, we have not learned to live within our means. And this has caused our currency to collapse. A currency which is in a country which is gold rich. It's a paradox or an oxymoron. Thank you.
Indeed. And Prosper, tell us, you know, let's do the pros and cons for dollarization. Over a period of time, the US dollar was a legal tender in Zimbabwe. Tell us what the benefits were at the time it was still a legal tender in the country. Prosper, we can't hear you. Seems you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. So the major advantage or benefit is that it allows or ensures macroeconomic stability, since the government will no longer be able to create money. What my colleague was saying, that the biggest challenge has been the creation of too much money, resulting in a situation whereby we have too much money chasing too few goods or too few United States dollars. So when we look at when we first dollarized in 2009, we almost overnight were able to eliminate hyperinflation. So we're able to ensure macroeconomic stability by switching or changing over the currency. So that's the biggest advantage, because without stability, the economy can't grow. Without stability, there can't be development. So stability ensures that there is a confidence in the economy, there is stability in the economy, and that businesses are actually able, investors are actually able to plan and to expand,
I think Prosper's connection is lost again. Perhaps I'll move the question on to Tawanda in a bit. But Tawanda, before you take that for me, let me come to Ernest. Now, Ernest, talk to us about why you think that these measures, because we know over the last 4 years, the Zimbabwean government, the finance ministry has been putting in measures, updating the country from time to time on some of the things that it's doing to tighten monetary policy and make sure that it mops up the excess liquidity in the system. Ernest, why do you think those things haven't worked?
Yeah, I think they haven't worked precisely because the monetary authorities are trying to go against what I may term economic logic. Simple economic logic is basically about supply and demand. But I think our financial authorities are trying to go beyond that and come up with their own way of doing economics, which makes it difficult for their measures to work. Their measures are against the basic logic. People basically want to operate on the basis of supply and demand. If you are looking at the currency, the local one, it has no demand because we are not exporting, we are not doing much in terms of production, we are doing more of importing. So when you look at the laws of supply and demand, they point to a situation where the local currency has no value, which the monetary authorities want to give it. They want to give it value, which it doesn't have, which then means that we are operating at an artificial level. We are going against the currency. We are going against the reality. The reality is that we are not producing. What we must do is to stimulate production and float the local currency so that its value is determined by market forces, which we are not doing. And if we don't want to do that, then we must be a productive country. We must produce, we must give incentives to the industrialists so that they can produce. We must come up with a policy framework that allows this country to produce more than what it is doing now. We must come up with the policies that allow Zimbabwe to go back to work. Currently, Zimbabwe is not at work. We are sort of a nation of consumers. We are a nation of people who are simply consuming that which others are producing. And in that case, we cannot have a strong currency. We need to reorganize our economic sector to look at mining. Mining must be reorganized so that it's not too much of an informal affair. It's not too much of an individualized affair. Once we start doing that, we may probably have an economy that is better organized, an economy that produces, that does not wait to consume. As long as we wait to consume, we may not have a strong currency.
Very well. Now, Prosper, I just want you to finish your thoughts on the pros and cons of dollarization. Just finish that for us, and then we'll move on to the measures individually.
So I highlighted the key benefit, which is ensuring stability in the macroeconomy. Then in terms of the key disadvantages, that it actually limits the policy freedom of government, in that government can't effectively use the monetary policy to influence the economy as well as macroeconomic developments.
I see, Prosper. What we're going to do now is take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at two of the key measures that had been put in place over the last 4 or 5 years in Zimbabwe to try and salvage the economy and also rescue the Zimdollar from further fall. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today our discussion is around the Zimdollar and, efforts being put in by the Zimbabwean government to salvage the local currency. But here are thoughts of some residents in Zimbabwe on why they should go back to the use of the US dollar as a legal tender.
Zimbabwean businesses are refusing to take local currency, which continues to lose value in a struggling economy. Instead, they are accepting US dollars in a bid to protect themselves from soaring inflation. Many products in Zimbabwe are imported and businesses need foreign currency to thrive, but the Zimbabwean currency known as bond note is not accepted outside the country. Even local business owners such as food vendors continue to shun the local currency.
I still prefer sales made with the US dollar so that I can restock and keep the balance. If I keep bond notes when I think of buying US dollars or I want to restock later, the rate would have changed. So I think the US dollar is better.
However, the country's Ministry of Finance recently announced measures to boost local currency, saying all government agencies will now substantially collect fees in the local currency. He added that all duties, with few exceptions, will also be paid with the bond note. Economists say the measure is a step in the right direction, but the government should have put in place measures to cushion the effect of the usage of bond note on both individuals and businesses.
Measures that have been announced by the Minister of Finance are expected to firstly reduce the accelerated depreciation of the currency, and secondly, reduce the accelerated dollarization of the economy.
For now, we must dollarize, full stop, because the Zimdollar has lost the value, so you can't force a dead currency on people. Even government is refusing the Zimdollar. Go to the passport. You can't get a passport in Zimdollar. So who am I to take the Zimdollar? He is saying that he's going to be encouraging the use of Zimdollar for payment of levies and duties, but he's not talking about the income taxes.
The Zimbabwean government is against the dollarization of the economy, as it says there are not enough US dollars to sustain the country's economy. Although experts say the local currency is depreciating, the government says the reintroduction of its own currency will have value and help both individuals and businesses grow. Omolola Ololade reporting for News Central.
Very well, still with us here to discuss this subject further are Tawanda, Ernest, and Prosper. They are all joining us from Zimbabwe. And, at this point, I'll pick your thoughts now, Tawanda. We know that over the past year, the Zimbabwean government has introduced gold coins. The Zimbabwean government has also introduced an e-currency backed by gold. Talk to us about how those are faring and perhaps why they haven't been able to shore up the Zimdollar.
Yes, so it's an issue of confidence and fiscal discipline. So, like for us as a people and as a nation, I think we are shy from taxing one another. So we try to be so kind to to the generality of our nation, so kind to the corporates that operate in our country, in as much or to the extent that we do not tax. We do not tax. And what does that mean? So that for us to finance government activity, we then go to the use of signorage, which is the power of government to print money. And by doing that, we create more and more digital currency, more and more paper currency, and our currency loses value. So we need to just come to a point to say, if we have certain trillions of Zimbabwean dollars, that's it. And if as a government we need money, we should tax. We should tax the mines. We should tax the big business. We should tax the small business. We should tax everyone.
Would it be easy to tax? Because Tawanda, remember that these are the same people you want operating in the country, so that Zimbabwe is not just a consuming country like Ernest has mentioned, but also producing something. So if the idea is to just tax, and tax these businesses who will be providing the jobs, will that work?
Yes, it works. If you go to the United States and you don't pay your taxes, even if you are acting, which is producing art, you'll be prosecuted. Or even if you run a news station like this, if you don't pay tax, you'll be prosecuted. So it's the only sustainable way to build business. And probably the question is, how will we use our tax? So when we get our tax, we make nice roads. When we get our tax, we make clean water. When we get our tax, we give security to these businesses. So it's the logical thing, and it's so easy. Given the opportunity to lead the finance ministry, we can turn this country around.
I see. Ernest, I want to pick your thoughts on taxation. Is Zimbabwe in the position to tax or impose more taxes on big businesses in the country as a way of, getting in more revenue to stabilize the economy, which will then perhaps feed into salvaging the Zimdollar?
Yes. Like,
oh, no, that's not for you, Tawanda. That's for Ernest.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think when we talk of taxing, Zimbabweans are among the most taxed people in the world. In fact, at one point, maybe we were third or fifth or somewhere there. But anyway, let me just stick to the fact that we are among the most taxed people. And when you look at big business, we don't have much of big business here in Zimbabwe. Well, what we probably have the conglomerates, very few of them. So we cannot expect much from them. So the issue is, if we are to increase our tax base, we need to increase, the production base. That is the issue. The economy is not running on proper business. When we look at our gold, most of the gold is going out of the country. And when we look at people who are doing business, they are mainly doing business on the basis of government tenders. And the business is not largely productive. That's the fact of the matter. We are not producing much, which we can then sell to probably other communities or other countries, so that we can have value in terms of what people may want from Zimbabwe, from other countries. That's our greatest predicament, and that is exacerbated by corruption, which is largely emanating from an economic situation that is dire, that is desperate. So to tax people, to impose more taxes, I don't think it will work. When we look at it, a few business people who are here are well-connected people, and we don't know if they are paying taxes. But the people who are paying taxes for certain are the workers. And the workers, as the situation stands, they are under a state of desperate deprivation. So I stick to the fact that we need to increase production. We need to review our economic policy framework. We need a total revamp of the policy framework so that, one, it is an economic framework in which we have a developmental state, a state which is simply not there to collect taxes from people who are already suffering, but a state which promotes economic activity to such an extent that Zimbabwe goes back to work.
Indeed, Ernest. Ernest, you know, we're running out of time, and I really need to move on from that just a little bit. But Prosper, for a largely informal sector-run economy like Zimbabwe has, what would it take to revamp it? What would it take to ensure that people are getting the money to produce, like Ernest is suggesting?
Well, I think it takes a combination of both monetary reforms, fiscal reforms, as well as institutional reforms. I think our key state institutions are in need of reform. When you look at our parastatals, for example, the government has been losing a lot of money through parastatals. So we need to be expediting our war parastatal reform agenda as a way of saving the government a lot of resources. We also obviously need to be making it easier for businesses, for investors to do business in Zimbabwe. When you look at the doing business environment in Zimbabwe, it's still very, very challenging. It takes a very, very long time, for example, for an investor to be able to have his business registered. And there are a lot of taxes, a lot of levies, a lot of charges that are actually levied by government, which actually makes it very, very expensive to do business in Zimbabwe. So we need to be simplifying our doing business regulations, reducing taxation, especially direct income taxes. I think we need to reduce direct income taxes as a way of incentivizing formalization of informal businesses, and also as a way of incentivizing new investments, whether from outside or even new local investments.
I see. Tawanda, so, you know, in the short to medium term, people are asking, the value of my money is dropping, especially for those who earn in the local currency. And so let's go back to, you know, the use of dollars on our markets. Two questions in one. Will re-dollarizing the economy be what Zimbabwe needs at this time, whether in the short to medium term, in the long term? And why the dollar? Why wouldn't the dollarization perhaps look at Rand, maybe, which is you know, neighboring South Africa? Talk to us about that. Tawanda, that's for you.
Oh, thank you. So for me, I think we need to be open to both ways, because dollarization has never come from the government. If it was in 2009, it was not the government, it's the people who start to trade and exchange the dollars. So yes, this will come naturally, because, and why the dollar? The dollar can be used anywhere in the world, like any way, and it's the current order. We need to accept that this is the current order which came after the Second World War, and it is what it is. So with the dollar, people can import from anywhere. So, but the sustainable thing is fiscal discipline. Let's simply stop creating more dollars in the computer, more Zimbabwe dollars in the computer, and let's stop printing more Zimbabwe dollars. But what do? Let's become a tax haven. Let's say for this big business, let's tell them, okay, you pay zero tax, but you give us shareholding in your company. So they'll be happy to give us 20% of their business and trade in Southern Africa and pay no tax at all. And this can also attract financial institutions in our nation. Like the location of Zimbabwe is like 2 hours away from all Southern African countries, and this would follow the Singapore model. So, so there are many ways. We're not thinking as Zimbabweans.
I see. So, well, so it's time for the finance ministry to think outside the box.
Yes,
But
yes,
Ernest,
you can
talk
put
to
a
us
textual
about what
shareholding.
role. Tawanda, I apologize. I'm running out of time and I want to cover as much as I can in this short period. But Ernest,
Okay,
talk to us about what role you think politics is playing in holding back the Zimdollar progress.
Yeah, I think our main challenge here is bad politics. When we look at our politics, it is too toxic. You know, there is the high level of polarization, and the country has not moved in terms of political reforms. In fact, during the government of national unity, we thought there was going to be movement. That was between 2009 and 2013, and there was no movement. So we have not yet much in terms of political reforms. And in fact, if anything, we are regressing politically. That is the problem. And the confidence is what is needed. And we are looked at by other countries as a country that is not democratic, a country that is infested by corruption, a country that is, the home to the politics of the individual. So as long as we have that, then we are going to have problems. We have not reformed our institutions, as Proto was saying there. Institutions, institutional reform is linked to politics. It's a function of the country's politics. And if our politics is not right, there is no way we are going to do the reforms of those parastatals, because at the end of the day, the parastatals may actually be benefiting a few individuals who are there to extract from the economy, notwithstanding what is happening to the common man.
I see. Prosper, I want to come to you. We've talked about the macroeconomic impact. We've also looked at the microeconomic impacts, which is what I want us to dig down further on, the impact it would have on everyday Zimbabweans who are saying, I want the US dollar because my local currency is almost worthless at this point. For those who are still earning largely in the Zimdollar, those whose savings are still in the Zimdollar, my question to you is, how do they protect their money in such a very volatile currency situation?
Well, the only way of protecting or preserving your value when you are still earning a significant percentage of your income in Zimdollars is to convert that Zimdollar income into US dollars. I think that's the only way you can. That's why we have seen a huge demand for the United States dollars. It's because people are trying to preserve their value by purchasing those US dollars using their Zimbabwe dollars.
But is that even possible? I mean, when you look at, for the people who are in the informal sector, you look at the US dollar, Zimdollar value at the moment, with $1 US, at auction value, it's over $3,000. On power markets, I'm told it's getting to $7,000 now. How do the ordinary Zimbabweans say that, you know what, I want to change my 3,000 Zimdollars, 7,000 Zimdollars to a US dollar for it to make sense? Tawanda, what are your thoughts about that?
So this is what happens on a daily basis. Like the fact of the matter is people, to save money, they go to the US dollar. And also remember, Tosin, like these people, they don't only rely on income from work. They've got projects. People, and in the private sector or in informal business, they are selling in dollars. Like, why would you sell in a currency which is not stable? So and the answer to that also is we are leaving probably people who are not the smartest people to go to the government jobs. We need to be like China. We need to be like Singapore, who attract talent in government. So they take the cream of the crop in their nation and reward them, and then they put them into high government positions, which are executive, and to make these decisions. So we've lost talent to the rest of the world, and left with less talented people who are just the remainders to make these decisions. So
I see.
with attracting talent in the executive,
and
we will get a breakthrough. So let's start having a very difficult exam to get into government. And then with that difficult exam, let's pay a lot of money for our executives in government.
I see.
And
I want to move on to Ernest now. Ernest, you'd have the last word on the show today. It would seem that it would be nearly impossible to protect your Zimdollar value. If you earn in Zimdollar, you trade every day and you have the Zimdollar and you still take the Zimdollar, that is, if that is the situation. But here is the government, on the other hand, that is bent on ensuring that the US dollar is not used, at least on the official front. That is what it hopes to be happening, but it's not happening on the ground. What should the government be doing now to at least ensure that those who are still earning Zimdollars do not lose value over time? What can it do in the short term?
Maybe let me just start by pointing out that the government policy is that of a multi-currency system, which means that officially currencies like the rand, the US, the pound, the British pound, and any other currencies that are workable can actually be used in Zimbabwe. That's the government position. So maybe coming to your question, what should government do? I think the government should take a lead in the political and economic reforms. We are heading for elections in August. We should make sure that the elections are free and fair. We should do, as a matter of urgency, institute electoral reforms that will give confidence to our electoral system. Then moving forward, if we have had a free and fair election, we should then move on to embrace economic reforms. Economic reforms in the line of parastatal reforms, in the line of making sure that we have anti-cartel laws, that is laws that will protect the common citizen from cartels, from conglomerates, because we are tending to have conglomerates which are controlling value chains. Yes.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we would have to leave our conversation here, but thank you so much for your time here on The Square today. Prosper, Ernest, and Tawanda joined us from Harare, where the country is still grappling with the impact of the fall of the Zimdollar against the US dollar. Tough situation there for those in the informal sector, those whose assets are still in the Zimdollar. But we'll see what else the government puts in place this month and forward to try and salvage the currency. In the meantime, you mull about what you've heard here today. There's more to see on our YouTube channel. But right now, I'm out of here. I am Kemini Amano. Bye-bye.